So now we want to understand how can we use plot function. So let's start with the simple vector of, let's say, for example, simulate random numbers from a normal distribution and say plot, and say we're gonna make a plot. So I'm going to expand this and let's see. So this is an example of an output from a plot function. So as you observed here from this plot is that the values from the vector have been plotted against the y-axis. So so on the x-axis we have the index of the position of the element in the vector, but we want to use data frames for easy explanations. So let's say, for example, we want to use this built-in data frame pressure. So let's say head of this data frame pressure. Okay, so this data frame has temperature and pressure. So let's try to use plot function. So if we say plot, so now we have to pass in pressure, which is a data frame. So if we run this is the output, right? So you notice that this by default has added axis labels that are simply the names of the columns in our data sets. So we have temperature and pressure, right? So say, for example, you also said pressure and then you said temperature, and then you said pressure, and then you said pressure, and you say pressure. So you observed here that the names are not, the names are the names that we have passed in this function. Okay, so there is also no title. So how can we add titles and axis labels? Now we want to learn how can we add title and axis labels. So let's first start by adding the title by saying plot, and then we pass in our data set, which is pressure. So we add the title by specifying main, and then say, for example, we're gonna say this is vapor pressure of mercury. If you run this, so now you observed that we still have the same x labels and y labels, but we have added the title to our plots. So now let us add in the x labels, our own desired x labels, and say, for example, this is going to be the temperature, and say maybe in degrees Celsius. And then for the y labels, we're gonna say let's this pressure, this is going to be pressure, and then we're gonna say this is millimeter of mercury. And let's run this. You observe that we have added our own desired x labels and y labels. So now we want to learn how can we change these. You observed here that we have these circles, these round circles. So now we want to learn how can we plot and change the symbols of these unfilled black circles. So R provides us with a PCH, that is PCH argument, and we can also change color with color argument. So an example of this is that we are going to add numbers that start from 1 up until 14, but the other figures and symbols starting from 21 through to 25, we have to specify border color using color argument, and we have to fill color using background argument. So let's look at first the predefined colors in R. So if you say colors, right, and you run this, you observe that this has given us tons of colors that are predefined that we can use in R. Okay, so now let's start to add colors and start to add different symbols. Say for example, in our plots, we want to say PCH becomes 21, right? So let's run this. Now what you should notice is that nothing has changed. That is because for symbol 21 through 25, we have to specify the border color. That is if we want to change the color, and also we have to specify the fill color using background argument. So first, let's start by adding color. So if you're gonna say here and say col equals to blue, for example, and let's run this, you notice that these circles now have a blue color. In order now to add the background color, we have to add another argument and say background color, let's say light blue. So now you observed from this plot that we now have the light blue colors with a border color that is blue. So that is how you can use a PCH and color as well as background argument in order to try and manipulate the symbols, the color as well as the background of your plots. But also we have set the color now, we have changed the shape. So we can also set the size by using character expansion argument. So let's run this and say we have to add cx, which is character expansion argument, and say for example we set this to 2. Now look what has happened to our plots. You observed that now these plots have now increased in size. So the default is equals to 1. So if you specify 1 here, you notice that they just becomes the same as before. So this indicates how times bigger or smaller than the usual size we want our points. So if we say 2, you notice it keeps on increasing. So that is how you change the shape, and that is how you add color, and that is how you can change the size of your points.